Nova Roma might be right up your alley. This city-building simulation gives us the colossal task of designing a new Rome for people who feel the old one just doesn't cut it anymore. The populace wants prosperity for all instead of decadence and mismanagement. But in Nova Roma, it's not just the citizens who have expectations, the gods also need to be appeased. If we fail to show them enough respect, they will personally tear our settlement apart again. And then there's Mother Nature, who has her own very particular methods when it comes to shaping the landscape. The game will launch in March this year, and in the tactical RPG Battle Brothers, we manage a mercenary company in a medieval fantasy world, carry out jobs for money as befits our station, and occasionally defend the land against dark threats. The game from Hamburg-based developer Overhype is a true hidden gem, and the studio's next project is even more ambitious by a whole order of magnitude. Menace looks like XCOM and plays like it too. However, the campaign is spiced up with procedurally assembled events and missions designed to boost replay value to absurd levels. In addition, relationships within and between our soldiers play a central role when planning our squad. Instead of leading a homogeneous group of loyal warriors, Menace puts us in control of units from several different factions, which we then have to unite toward a common goal. Which characters we encounter in each individual run is left to chance. The game will launch in February. Mugenics is a comprehensive turn-based tactics RPG. Edmund McMillan earned legendary status with Super Meat Boy and The Binding of Isaac. Now, the release of his next game is approaching. Together with colleague Tyler Glale, he has been working for 6 years on Mugenics. We breed an army of cats in an abandoned house and send them on various adventures. In classic roguelite fashion, each cat can only be sent on a single run. Afterward, we have to hope that our best cats breed with each other and potentially produce new, more powerful units that we can then use in turn. Each run advances the story and unlocks new paths and secrets. As in Isaac, the game is far from over just because you've reached the ending once. After around 30 hours, we still felt like we were only scratching the surface and are excited to see what revelations the full version in February still has in store. Anyone who isn't bothered by the silly, pitch black, and at times uncomfortable humor should definitely keep an eye on Mugenics. The game will launch in February. Video games set in this universe of Game of Thrones are still surprisingly rare, and those that do exist aren't major blockbuster productions. Warner has so far been unable to squeeze out true flagship titles from the brand on the scale of a Hogwarts Legacy or decades of Star Wars games. Now, Game of Thrones. War for Westeros goes in that direction. The first images are reminiscent of the RTS classic Battle for Middle-earth, which is hardly a bad role model for adapting a popular fantasy universe. While that game featured factions like Gondor, Rohan, Isengard, and Mordor, War for Westeros lets us choose between House Stark, House Lannister, House Targaryen, and the undead White Walkers. We decide which faction we want to use to vie for supremacy over the continent, and, ultimately, who will sit on the Iron Throne. The release date is announced for this year. Another classic in the turn-based games is Heroes of Might and Magic: Olden Era, which should release this year. The series aims to return to its old strengths, more precisely to the strengths of Part 3, the most popular entry in the franchise. However, the new Heroes of Might and Magic is not meant to be just a copy, but rather to meaningfully evolve the core gameplay and offer more possibilities than its role model without losing its elegance. Exploration of the world map and, of course, battles against other factions remain central. True to the series, our chosen hero stands at the edge of the battlefield, hurling spells basically like dads at a youth league soccer match. Just slightly more dignified. What's new is that we can now pass laws in our capital to better tailor our faction to our preferred playstyle. The motto across the board is evolution, not revolution. As the title may already suggest, the game is set before the other Heroes installments. It's a prequel, in which one or two familiar faces will also make an appearance. A small team at Stutterfox Studios promised nothing less than revolutionary gameplay with Falling Frontier. The real-time strategy game has been in development for what feels like an eternity. The studio's latest update gives hope that early access will finally begin in 2026. Which features will be available at that point is still unclear. Announced so far are a campaign, a skirmish mode, and even a scenario editor. In Falling Frontier, we colonize space, build stations and ship, explore, travel, and fight real-time space battles against the AI. The developers place great emphasis on scientific accuracy. Planning and tactics are meant to be far more important than amassing raw resources and brute firepower. Fans of so-called hard science fiction should be just as well served as seasoned strategy veterans. Star Wars Zero Company is a new title that is announced for release in 2026. Comparing every turn-based tactics game to XCOM may be a bad habit, but here the comparison fits like a glove. The game doesn't just share superficial similarities with the classic sci-fi setting, turn-based combat, positioning, squad management, and so on. The heads of Studio Bit Reactor are former employees of XCOM developer Firaxis. Instead of leading a squad of randomly generated soldiers of earthly origin, in Zero Company we command a colorful group of distinctive characters, including clone troopers, Mandalorians, and of course Jedi. According to the official description, custom-created characters will also be usable. Between missions, there is XCOM-style base building and research. Our decisions are set to determine victory or defeat, the fate of Zero Company, and that of the entire galaxy. A warm hit of nostalgia combined with a modern framework under the hood. That's Dwarf, the spiritual successor to Command and Conquer, Tiberian Sun. At first glance, the RTS looks like a forgotten classic from the 1990s, but instead of merely copying old ideas, the team wants to set new accents within the genre. The developers have drawn inspiration from both older and newer games like StarCraft and Factorio. As in the former, there are two resources to harvest, but instead of simply transporting them into a universal stockpile with a single unit, this game requires us to manage production chains in order to process resources efficiently and deliver them where they're needed. The changes go much deeper than that. Unit recruitment, for example, is also supposed to have its own prerequisites and require a certain amount of tactical maneuvering. This game aims to be a new game in an old genre, striking a balance between nostalgia and modernity. Whether the game will first appear in early access or be released directly as a full version is still unknown. In the sequel to Warhammer 40,000, Mechanicus, we either take control of the Adeptus Mechanicus or, for the first time, their enemies, the Necrons. Like its predecessor, Part 2 is once again an XCOM-style turn-based tactics game, but it does away with some elements such as base building or hit probability. Essentially, we complete one level after another, upgrade our army, and make strategic decisions. New additions include a cover system and a reworked cognition system. Cognition points are collected during combat and can then be spent on certain abilities. In the first game, these points were mainly earned by defeating and studying enemies. In Mechanicus 2, units instead gain cognition points by performing battlefield actions that correspond to their role within the squad. A unit intended as a tank, for example, is rewarded for drawing enemy fire. This results in far more tactical possibilities than in the predecessor. And for players unfamiliar with the precise regiments of Warhammer, it also provides a quick and intuitive sense of what role each individual character is meant to fulfill. The game is therefore also well-suited as an entry point into the ever-growing franchise. Ambition may be lacking in many indie projects, but that is definitely not the case with Earth of Orin. This independently developed city builder comes in a retro look that is sure to evoke nostalgic feelings in many players. Under the hood, however, the strategy simulation aims to impress in a big way. It seems Earth of Orin wants to be everything at once: a city-building sandbox, strategy game, cozy game, and economic simulation. It features political systems, religion, and combat, technological development, trade, different regions, weather conditions, natural disasters, a day-night cycle, a free build mode, and even a story campaign with multiple factions. The game is set on a fantasy continent with centuries of history divided into various biomes and kingdoms. Our involvement begins at a point when larger civilizations already exist, and we must establish ourselves among them with our own realm. A demo is already available on Steam, and the full launch will be in January this year.